Welcome to Daily Sourdough. Today I have a really nice holiday bread for you. It is a chocolate cranberry pistachio bread. Really nice. You're going to love this for the holidays. So let's get started making this delicious bread. Start with 2 cups of very lively sourdough starter. So I fed this earlier today. It's been sitting on the counter for about 6 hours. It's full of really good healthy bacteria and yeast. Then add to that 1.5 cups of warm water. And this is warm to the touch, so about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Stir that up until your starter is dissolved. Should just take a minute because this starter is very full of bubbles, very airy. Now add 1/2 cup of honey, and this is my sweetener. You can also use sugar, but I'm using honey today. And another 1/2 cup of cocoa, and I am using what is called triple blend cocoa from King Arthur Farms. It's a really nice, rich, dark chocolate. Now mix this thoroughly. Get all that cocoa mixed in. It's very dark, very rich, and it takes a minute to mix in. This recipe will make 2 loaves. So of course, if you only want 1 loaf, just cut all of these measurements in half. But when I make bread, I always make at least 2 loaves. Sometimes I make 4 and 5 loaves. And once you have all these ingredients mixed in thoroughly, let this rest on your counter for 15 minutes. After the 15-minute rest, zest 1 orange into your bowl. And this little bit of zest is just going to bring out the flavors of the chocolate and the cranberry. It will just add a hint of orange, but mostly it just enhances the other flavors. Next, add 3 cups of bread flour. And you'll really want to use bread flour for this because bread flour has a higher protein content, which makes for a better gluten strength. So you'll have a better breadcrumb and a better rise out of bread flour. And also add 1 teaspoon of salt. Now mix this thoroughly. Get all that flour mixed in. And we're going to let this rest on the counter for 45 minutes. And this is the Autolease stage, and Autolease is just when the flour is absorbing all the moisture from the water and the starter. Okay, so cover this and let it sit for 45 minutes. After your 45-minute rest period, add another cup of flour, and we're going to mix this in with our hands this time because the warmth of your hand really helps the live yeast and bacteria. It kind of activates them, warms them up, just like the sun does for us. It makes us feel good and lively and excited, and that's what the warmth does for these little live organisms. Once that's mixed in, we'll add another 1/2 cup of flour, maybe a full cup. And you just want to watch your dough and decide what your dough needs, because the humidity in the air, the temperature of the air will all determine how much flour your dough needs. So we'll just work that in, and then it will tell us what to do next. If you end up putting a little too much flour in, then just wet your hand and continue working the flour into your dough. So you can either keep a little bowl of water next to you and just dip your hand into the water and then continue kneading, or you can just run it under the faucet. Just get your hand wet and continue working that flour into your dough. Now, just like us, after we've worked really hard, sometimes we need a little rest. While this is resting, we need to soak the cranberries in orange juice and prepare the nuts. So take 3/4 cup of dried cranberries and soak them in about a cup of orange juice, and you can use water as well. Orange juice just enhances the flavors. It's very nice. The reason for soaking the cranberries is so that they don't absorb all their moisture from the bread dough itself, and they remain plump and firm, and the bread dough retains its own moisture. And then take between 1/2 cup and 1 cup of pistachios, and they can either be unsalted or lightly salted if you don't mind the extra salt, and just lightly pound them with a mallet to break them up a little bit so that they're not whole. But you still want large pieces, so don't pound them too much, just briefly. And we will add the cranberries and the pistachios to the dough after this 30-minute rest. After the 30-minute rest period, it's time to add the cranberries and the pistachios. In order to do that, we need to stretch the dough out as thin as possible without tearing it. So do that by reaching under the dough to the center and then just gently pulling it out. And just continue to do that, gently pulling on the dough from the center on out until you get it quite thin, but don't tear it. And just keep working with it, gently pulling on the dough. We want to make the dough thin so that the add-ins are mixed thoroughly. This will allow us to get the nuts and the berries mixed in all throughout the bread. And you don't want to use a rolling pin because that will smash the bubbles that are beginning to form in your dough. Now that it's spread out quite thin, sprinkle most of the berries and most of the nuts on your dough, reserving a few behind, and spread them out. Now, taking the bottom of your dough, just gently fold it towards the center, and then press it down so that the berries and the pistachios stick. Then bring the left side toward the center, and then bring the right side toward the center. And add the rest of the berries and the nuts in this layer. And just press them into your dough so they stick, and then fold the top of your dough toward the center and press that down. And it's okay if some of the pistachios and the berries poke through the dough. That will be pretty in the end. Then once more, just kind of pull your dough, pull the right side of your dough out gently, fold that toward the center until you have a nice little package. Then, now place this back in your bowl and let it rest for another 30 to 60 minutes, and then we will do 2 sets of stretch and folds with an hour in between each one. For each stretch and fold, reach under the dough with your hand gently hold on to the dough, lift it up, fold it over itself, and press down. You'll do that on each quarter. So gently lift, and it's pretty stiff right now, so it's not stretching very well, but just gently lift from the center, stretch the dough out, and fold it over itself. And see how the berries and the nuts are peeking through. That's okay. It's going to be very pretty in the end. So you'll do a total of 4 stretch and folds, 1 on each quarter of the dough. Then flip it over, let it rest another hour, and then repeat that process. Now let your dough rest on the counter covered for an hour, and repeat that process one more time. So 1 more stretch and fold, then cover it again and put it in the refrigerator to ferment for 12 hours or overnight. It's day 2. My bread dough fermented in the refrigerator overnight and now has been proofing on the counter for 4 hours. And it looks like it's ready to shape. Let's test it. Poke your dough with your finger, and then if it stays indented and just springs back lightly, then it's ready. It's finished proofing. If it bounces right back, it needs more time proofing. But since it stayed indented, it's ready to shape. Take your dough out of your bowl, and a handy bench scraper is so useful. Especially the kind that's flexible like that. Then it can just move with your bowl. Then cut your dough in half because we're making 2 loaves here. To shape your dough, pull your dough just in a little bit of a rectangle. Just gently reach under the dough and pull from the center. Then fold the left side into the center, fold the right side into the center. And you can see the berries and the pistachios peeking through, which is great. Now fold the dough in half and put the seam down. Now take your hand and cup your hand under the dough. So I'm right-handed, I'll be using my right hand. Take my right hand, cup it under the dough, and then push it towards me so that the dough rolls in a half circle towards me. Lift it up, do that again. So just gently pull the dough towards you. And your other hand will guide the dough while your dominant hand will do the work. And what this does is it smooths out the top. The top of your dough will become very smooth and tight. So just continue to do that until you have a nice round ball. And if your berries and nuts fall out, just press them back in. I'll be cooking this in a banneton, and I took the cover off the banneton because I'm going to sprinkle the flour directly onto the bamboo, and then these bamboo rings will leave an indentation in the bread. And when you flour it, then it's going to leave a really nice pattern on the bread because you'll have rings of white against the dark dough, which is very beautiful. So heavily flour your banneton. You can also cook this in a bread pan. It will turn out beautiful as well. Dump out any excess flour that you have in there, but you want it heavily floured. Now take your dough and put it upside down in your banneton. Now cover it and let it proof again on the counter until it's risen and is very swollen and puffy. It'll take probably 2 hours, maybe a little longer if your house is cold. So here it is, friends, a really festive sourdough bread that you can share with friends and family. It has beautiful green and red colors to it and that rich dark cocoa. Be sure and try this recipe and then stay tuned because I have more holiday recipes coming up on Daily Sourdough.